Right at the outset, I want to pay my tributes to Mr. Prem Behel, the founder of Exhibition India, who's a great friend, and I've had some great memories with him, and I was part and parcel of the Smart Cities Expo right from the first Smart City Expo when it was started. I was serving as the Deputy Mayor of Shimla, directly elected at that time. Now regarding this session, as has already been elaborately explained by ma'am, what I suggest is that since we have an hour, and I'm not sure how the previous sessions have gone, but what I prefer to do is that every speaker gets some 7-8 minutes in the first round, and the second round then we have Q&As. The Q&As can come from the moderator as well as from the participants, the audience. So yeah, you'll also get a chance to ask the questions to our panelists. The third thing that I want to point out is that I want this, it's a kind of provocation. I want to make this session a little provocative, a session where we have contestation of ideas. Now, why I say so? For the simple reason, I've been watching the trajectory of the growth of the smart cities in our country. And where are we when we talk about resilience or sustainability? And of course, we have the 17 SDGs across the globe. So, to me, what resilience is? I think resilience is when you falter, and then you again get up. And when you get up with more strength. I think that's what resilience is. That resilience has to be in the individuals. We as human beings are quite resilient, but also the institutions that we create, and also that we do not falter again. Now, are we doing that? If we see the kind of urbanization that is happening in our country, of course, I don't want to go into the classical understanding of urbanization. I've already authored 2 books on that, the one on cities in transition, where the 4th generation of industrial revolution, we call it Internet of Things, we call it data-enabled governance, whatever. How much data is good data? I always ask that question. But the point is, this form of urbanization that we are witnessing in the country, is it sustainable at all or not? That's the question I want to raise. And that's what I want to raise because from our panelists, when they speak on their respective fields, because they are experts, like they are doyens in their own field. At the same time, if you see 2021, we are not having the census as yet. But you see there are 23,000 new villages, the peri-urbans that are going to be added. And the smart cities that were supposed to be the lighthouses, just last year our finance minister said, we require a different paradigm approach on urbanization, which means they were never the lighthouses. They didn't achieve the desired results that they should have. So what is it that we are doing? And that's the question I want to pose before our panelists. If this is not the way how we have to unfold our urbanization, then what is the alternative? How do we go ahead? Why I say so? For the simple reason, take for example Surat, one of the finest towns, cities that speaks and the boasts of, and I've been talking to the mayor of Surat, to the city resilient officer. I said, what kind of resilience are you doing? And the person said, why do you ask this question? I said, the moment our government of India announced lockdown, even 24 hours, your people, your working class people couldn't stay back. They had to migrate. Surat was the worst example. So for resilience for whom? Is it resilience for the people? Cities, data, technology, for whom? I come with the idea that this resilience, cities have to be for the people. And the kind of inequality that has crept in the last 3 decades. The World Bank has come up with a report. And the report says if we have to do the bare minimum, that we talk about, sustainability, the bare minimum infrastructure to provide our residents in urban India clean drinking water, to provide minimum basics of solid waste management. 60% of the waste doesn't even get collected. Forget about getting it treated. So, and of course, EPR, we have an expert from our Pollution Control Board who's going to speak on the EPR. If the bare minimum is to be done, then we require an investment of $850 billion. Where is this money going to come from? And I heard lots of our speakers speaking about PPP. It's just 3% in the last 3 decades. That has the private big capital that has entered our cities to ameliorate our problems as far as urban infrastructure is concerned. So where are we heading? The second element that I want to raise in this whole issue of cities is, what about urban governance? Who rules? Is there a participatory form of democracy? And as ma'am was pointing out, I was a member of the National Task Force to review the 74th Constitutional Amendment. I'm not sure whether you are even aware of this amendment. This amendment said, for the first time in the country, that every 5 years we will have elections to the municipal bodies. We saw elections to Delhi took place after a year. Mumbai still do not have the elections. So who plans for whom in the cities? Shimla, the town that I come from, it's been a year, there are no elections yet. So we had the 74th Amendment that said, okay, the cities must be governed by the people and the elected institutions. And I remember when the Smart Cities model of development was concerned, and what did we think? We thought, once you have the SPVs, the special purpose vehicles, and most of the leaders of the SPVs are coming here to deliver the lecture, speaking about what, just not even 2% of the city. That's what the area-based development they are talking about. So K.C. Sivaramakrishnan, who gave this amendment, who was a bureaucrat, the then Secretary Urban Development, said, Tikender, do you know what is this SPV? It's like writing an obituary of the 74th Constitutional Amendment. And we've seen big cities, you talk about Pune, Pimpri, Chinchwad, Mumbai, they said, we don't want your smart cities because it encroaches on my right to govern the cities. So when we are talking about this transformation that is taking place from the economic perspective, from the people's perspective, neither is it resilient nor is it sustainable. Then what should be the alternatives? And there's a whole lot of things that I could have said about the way we are unfolding our urbanization. But to me, unfortunately, this is not the way how India has to advance into, with the demographic dividend that we have. Of course, we want technology. Of course, we want data. But this technology and data has to be synced with the people. Mobility, our people are going to speak about mobility. The push for metros, the push for capital-intensive technologies is not what the cities want. Cities that have already transformed into almost 90% informality. You have the huge unorganized sector. If there's a 2 degrees rise in centigrade, mind you, in Delhi this time, there'll be hundreds of deaths taking place because a large chunk of the people work in the informal sector. Do we even think about that? So, as I said in the beginning, of course, there's a rosy picture also. We also know how technology is helping us, particularly in the health sector. So, as I said, this session I want to be a session where you have this contestation, battle of ideas. Let's see how our panelists, describe their different fields where they're working on. And in the mail, when we thought that we would have this session, they asked, do you structure the question? I said, no, I won't structure your questions. Speak whatever you want to, of course, within the time limit. Ma'am, I want that timekeeper stuff so that 8 minutes, somebody raises the alarm, 8 minutes, and then we'll have another round. Thank you so much, all of you coming here. And once again, I want to pay this tribute to Mr. Prem Behel, who conceived this idea. And of course, he was a man par excellence. There are no words to describe him. So over to you, Rumi. And Rumi and I, our friendship dates back. We were together in the BRICS conference in Moscow. And so Rumi, no one better than you to describe the demographic changes that we find in the Indian cities now. Please, over to you. You can come here or you can speak from there.
I don't know if this is working or not. Are you able to hear me? Is my voice? Is it, am I audible? Okay, thank you. I'm a little worried and scared after listening to what the chair of this session said. And as you all know, urban is a big subject. It covers so many aspects, and it's not possible to speak on each and everything within this small session of about one hour. So I will restrict my comments to, to two areas, two focus areas, which are also mentioned in the program which you might have received or seen, and that is to say how to make cities environmentally resilient and how to make cities economically resilient. Smart Cities program is a very comprehensive program of the Government of India. As far as I know, it's coming to an end this year in June, on 25th June. But they have a series of other parallel initiatives which do cover different elements of smart cities components which are part of those current initiatives, which will be launched after the end of this program. Or several of them are already underway, like climate, smart cities, etc. So just to restrict myself to these two aspects of making the cities environmentally and economically resilient. As you all know, India is an urbanizing nation, and there is a high demand for goods and services in cities, especially in cities, because of a large population that lives in cities and urban agglomerations. And a lot of work is being done by the government departments and the ministries to address the challenges of urbanization in terms of planning and governance, and the entire effort is focused on how to manage urban growth. But we all know that several problems exist in different urban sectors. In making a city environmentally resilient, to me, it could mean different things to different persons. You could have a different idea of how to make a city environmentally resilient. In my opinion or view, I think to make cities environmentally resilient, you need to manage various determinants of environment. And by determinants of environment, I mean all those factors or aspects which are shaping the environment in which we live in. And by this I mean this has to do with air quality, this has to do with green spaces, green cover and biodiversity. This has to do with the surface water bodies. This has to do with open spaces within cities, and this has to do with sanitation, which includes drainage, sewerage and solid waste management. All of those aspects whichever the lady who began this session mentioned about. In my view, if I just restrict myself to the aspect of air quality, the use of fossil fuels in various sectors such as transport, industry, etc. This is a big issue because of the kind of emissions that are being generated by using fossil fuels. And there is an emphasis on decarbonizing urban spaces, decarbonizing cities. And in the transport sector, a lot of focus is being laid on transitioning to electric vehicles. This is a good idea. It's happening all around the world. Many countries like China, the United States, many European nations are several years ahead of India so far as penetration of the EV sector is concerned. But in India, the market share is still less. Market share, by market share I mean the sales share of electric vehicles in the total vehicles sold in a certain year. So it is about 1% in India, and it is fairly high in China, in US, in several European nations. So the progress on this front, how it is related to environment, the transportation sector generates not a very high, significant proportion of emissions. It is a major contributor to the pollution that is occurring in our cities, and therefore it is not a bad idea to think of alternative fuels or alternative ways in which the transportation sector or motor vehicles can run. And therefore, I undertook a study on the state of electric vehicle sector in India, and whether India can learn some lessons from other nations that are much ahead than India insofar as EVs is concerned, penetration of EVs. And to quickly tell you about the findings or the lessons that I learned from that study is that India needs to work more on coming up with affordable different types of electric vehicles. Affordability is an issue. The second thing is, I'm going to be very brief because this is a subject in itself. The second thing is about the range of models that are available in the market to buy. So the choices are so less, especially in the four-wheeler category, that people prefer vehicles that run on ICE, internal combustion engines, or to say conventional vehicles driven by petrol or diesel. The third thing is about in the EV sector that I find is about the condition of batteries. Most nations are laying great emphasis on producing EV batteries that are high, that are able to give high energy. They are high density batteries that can offer a long driving range. When you go and buy an EV, this is one of the concerns among the buyers, whether I should be able to travel to a long distance after buying an EV or not. So this is another area of concern. The fourth point is about the availability of charging stations or battery swapping stations in the country. It is still less. When you do a comparison between India and China, India has about 2 million electric vehicles, registered electric vehicles in the country. China has about 2 million electric charging stations in public areas, and India has about 5,000 charging stations. So that's the difference in scale when you compare with nations that are ahead. The next point is about the collaboration that India needs to do with other nations on aspects such as manufacturing and technology. And one more aspect, since I have a background in planning, I did urban and regional planning from the School of Planning and Architecture. The planners can make a difference in greater adoption of electric vehicles. So what they can do is they can earmark zones, they can earmark low emission or zero emission zones, which would be like an incentive for EV owners or EV drivers, so that they feel privileged, they feel better when they take out their EVs, that they have certain designated areas in the city which they can access, and that works like an incentive to go for an EV. The other areas in the environment sector is about minimizing pollution from others, from sources such as buildings, from sources such as the activities like movement from the amount of time that people spend in commuting from one place to another place. There are planning interventions that are available, like transit-oriented development or green buildings or protecting green areas or surface water bodies and expanding these. All of these help in mitigating the pollution in a certain area. The second point, and I'm going to conclude now, is about how to make city economically resilient. And here again I would say that economically resilient could have different meaning to different persons. Your understanding of resilience in the economic context would differ from another person's understanding. In my view, I feel that the local governments in the country, municipalities, urban local bodies, which are the main agencies in the governance process, their financial condition has to improve. Most of them are financially weak, and as a result of which they are unable to provide things that people need, like services of various kinds. So, in my opinion, in my view, I feel that their financial condition can be strengthened through improved collection of taxes and user charges. Not only this, they need to explore public-private partnerships, as has been done under several smart city projects. Then they need to capture the land values or land monetization. This has been tried in certain cases abroad and even in India, where land as a source of revenue has helped in generating revenues for the local government. Then the other aspect of economically resilient city is the and I'm going to conclude now, won't take a few seconds. The second aspect here is about creating employment opportunities for the needy population groups, like those who are in the informal sector, designing zones for them, earmarking zones for them in cities, so that they are able to operate in a proper manner, not harassed by the authorities. And also some kind of skill development center should be established to nurture local talent and skills. So there are many things to say, but
I know, yeah, time is...
Don't want to encroach on others' times. Thank you very much for the opportunity, and over to the chair of this session.
Thank you, Rumi, and I'll come back to you because I have a few questions maybe we'll have from the audience. Ma'am, would you please take...
Thank you very much for setting the context and laying out the foundation for the session. So primarily, I work in the sector of certifying buildings and cities, green buildings, green cities. So I'm going to kind of lay out that integrated framework that kind of leads up to a smart city or a green city, and some of the global experiences that we have been gaining by implementing. We implement a framework called LEAD, which is Leadership in Energy and Environmental Development. We are headquartered out of Washington DC, and we are there in about 180 countries. And we run also a Lead for Cities and Communities program. And through the framework that we have developed, which we call the LEED certification, we lay out an integrated set of credits or criteria, and we let the cities undertake them and implement them and monitor and measure them and move forward towards kind of having a green, sustainable, resilient, safe, inclusive city. So having said so, the first thing what I would say is people form the centerpiece of a city. A city is not an entity that is devoid of people. So a success of any city being smart and green would depend on how people operate it. I mean, you would find that in many places we lay out a very, very smart infrastructure, but when it comes to people, they may sometimes, not understand the benefit of it and more interested in taking the immediate benefit by pilferaging, etc. So a smartly designed city does not remain smart anymore. So in the framework that we have developed, people form the centerpiece, and quality of life of people, knowledge, training which they gain to live in a city that is smart and green, designed to be smart and green, is very critical. Now coming to what exactly defines a smart city, and we have heard the different principles and the different strategies that go into it. One of again the critical aspect which was mentioned as a planning perspective is an integrated thinking. For example, we heard about resilience, we heard about terminologies like green spaces, we heard about air pollution. Now, when you design a planned city, everything comes together and you have to design it for the people. For say the same resource can serve multiple functions. Let me take just one example. When I'm talking about say a green space in a city, a green space can be designed to form a green infrastructure that adds to the resilience of the city to absorb say the excess run water. The same green space can help the city to be resilient in terms of battling say urban heat island, which raises the temperature of a city and which finally leads to an increased energy consumption. The same green space can contribute to reducing the air pollution in the city. The same green space can function as an active space where people go and do activities and physical activities and be fit. So in the integrated planning process, each and every element is very important, but unfortunately what we see in India, and which is also in deviation with many countries where we operate, that each of the aspect is dealt with by an individual ministry or an individual department. You talk about say infrastructure, somebody will come and lay a stormwater infrastructure, then you come and want to lay say a telecom infrastructure and you will dig it up and you will kind of make a place for it. Then somebody will come and want to lay some other infrastructure. So this integrated back and forth which happens, that leads to a lot of wastage, and I think this is one of the preliminary thing that has to go in our planning process in terms of integrated planning. When I was coming, so today I was the first time I came into the newly built Pragati Maidan. I was wondering, this was a heritage place and where there were a lot of interesting structures. So when we actually reconstructed it now, of course it's very fancy, beautiful and very nice. But was there circularity embedded? Did all the demolition waste that got generated get reused in the structure? That was the first question I had. What did we do to retain, things like adaptive reuse? The same structure could have been minimally destroyed and made into something which is more useful. So we talk about many things, but when it comes to implementation, then somewhere we fall short. So I think this is one of the very critical pieces of smart city. And finally, when I talk about people, I feel one thing is very important, and this is something that we talk about in green context, is equity. When we talk about people living, talk about the COVID times, many of our health infrastructure failed, but who were the most the vulnerable? It was the people who were down in the economic strata. They could not afford, there was huge amount of migration, they could not go back. So equity remains again one of the fundamental issues which we battle with. So any smart city has to provide equitable infrastructure that is accessible to all, and some basic minimum infrastructure that all strata of people can access and live, in a cohesive manner. So I leave with these thoughts, and I would like to, hear more in the next round.
I'm so happy you brought in the whole question of circularity, equitable cities. Yeah, probably we'll have questions in the next round. Sir, would you like to take, because we have the Sri Lankan experience here.
Thank you, Mr. Panwar. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I think all the other panelists are very educated in this particular subject. So let me cover, as I'm a civil engineer, let me cover how the construction sector can contribute to the resilient and to be a sustainable place. Just comparing with the two countries, you all are 64 times bigger in land, and you all have 1.4 billion people, and we have only 22 million people in our country. But where the construction industry is concerned, we have only 1.2 million involved in the construction sector workers, but you all have 49.5 million is involved. It's double as our population, And also your construction turnover is 131 billion, but ours is 3 billion US dollars. So you can see how small we are. But the thing is, where the DGP contribution is concerned, Few years ago, we have also contributed 9.6% to our GDP. That is very, very important. Even India is contributing about 8.2 to the GDP. So where the construction industry is concerned, Sri Lanka was doing very, very well, and our structures are very solid, and we are really maintaining our standards. Even now, we have no more collapses in the buildings in our country. So why I am talking about the construction industries? Construction industry is one of the major industry which spoil the environment. We spoil 40% of our, we use 40% of the energy. So we use we spoil 23% of our air, and where the water is concerned, we are also spoiling about 30 to 40% of the water. And water and wastewater things are concerned. So we have to be very, very, very careful in the construction industry. We can do a lot of things to minimize all those things, to mitigate all those things, to contribute to be a sustainable place and the resilient place. So in Sri Lanka, what we have done is, I am the president of the Ceylon Institute of Builders. So in year 2009, we have started the green certification. Green mark certification to be given in buildings. So that could control a lot in spoiling the air, water and energy. Even 2010 again the Green Building Council has been started in Sri Lanka. So these things maintaining to control the air pollution, water pollution and the landfills, etc. We are very particular about it. And our environmental authority also doing a very good job. Because we had a spoiling rate of 200% in our waterways. So the environmental authority is controlling that up to a certain standard. So we are very, very careful of doing that, because our air quality is very good. We are maintaining air quality index of in between 60 and 80, which I think in Kanpur and all, your index is over 160 to 300. So what we got to do is we have to maintain that. So to maintain also becoming very difficult now, because spoiling rate has gone up. So considering all those things, the construction industry can do a lot to the nature. And also we are trying to do more than the smart cities. We are doing to do a rural urbanization. A lot of people are coming into the cities very fast. Even here it's happening. Sri Lanka also is happening very fast. So we are trying to do a rural, it's called urbanization, rural urbanization, where we are going to keep them there in their cities and giving them all the necessary facilities. So I think with this particular urbanization, if it works out, we are very hardly working with the government to do this. It's all depend on government to government. So we have done a construction sector roadmap year 2023 and 2024. If the government agrees to the roadmap, I think we can do some wonders with the construction industry in Sri Lanka. Thank you.
Ashish ji, we've had the IPCC 6 report, working groups 1, 2, 3, and the recent one which came, I think, a week ago, all point out at, it's kind of existential crisis. And Rumi started the discussion by saying, pollution is also like something very important in the cities. So you being one of the important, agencies, how do you think, because if people are dying because of pollution, and that too which has a linkage to the climate change, because after all, most of this in the city is coming from the fossil fuels. Earlier we never used to bring this linkage, but now there's a very direct linkage in that stuff. So please, how do you think? Yeah.
So before coming to your points, because I'm coming with the experience in solid waste management. So my organization is working on solid waste management, developing models and providing services to the stakeholders. And I think Smart City solid waste management play a very critical role. You build the infrastructure, you build roads, but if you're not managing your waste properly or scientifically, that city cannot be named as a smart city. So, so there are a lot of efforts being done by the governments and many private people, agencies and industries to manage the solid waste, but we have not reached to the economical sustainability or environmental sustainability, because in some cities we are only focusing on environmental sustainable model, and in some city we are only focusing on environmental sustainability. So I totally agree with Mili ma'am that there is a lack of integration between the departments and the ministries and different stakeholders. So if we really want to build up this smart city, so first of all, a smart city is made by the smart people, and that's we are not focusing on the community development, capacity building of the people, training of the people who are involved in making your city more sustainable. So we are more focusing on the infrastructural part, and mind you, creating good infrastructure will not make our city or nations smart. This is the people who will make your city more smart and sustainable. So we have to inculcate the good practices of environment. And what we are feeling, I'm working with the community for last 20 years, and what I observe working with the community, that environment is not the priority subject in Indian cities. So Indians are morely, there is a 3 subjects which are mostly bothered them: roti, kapda or makan. So they are 24 hours thinking about how to earn money for their own survival and for the survival of their family, and they can somehow manage or compromise the environmental conditions. If someone is not living in the good environmental condition, he's managed to survive, because environment is not at that priority. So what we need to do before creating resilient environment or economical resilience, we need to create demand for good environment. So there are so many people, they are not demanding for good environmental conditions. I'm standing on the roads, and someone emitting pollutant into the air. I'm forced to ingest those pollutants. I'm not complaining. Those things are not bothering me. Somebody is littering waste in front of me. Those things are not disturbing me. I'm not stopping those people who are putting their namkeen wrappers outside their car windows. So before building a smart city culture, we need to develop culture among the citizens, and all these bad habits or poor civilized things should bother the common man. And once these things start disturbing the common man, we don't need any infrastructure, we don't need any technology, because traditionally we were very sustainable. Means when there were no technology, there were no if I go back to my childhood, I hardly generate anything. Means whatever we consume, it will be reused or recycled automatically. Means my lifestyle was so conservative. I come from the very conservative family that we consumed only those things which is actually required by me and my family. So these things, I think we also need to work on these issues besides developing infrastructure and all. And as we were discussing the policy, and the government should also bring policy which is doable and replicable. So government is also making policy which is somehow biased and giving benefit to some part of the community, and their policies are not integrated. If I take example of extended producer responsibility, so we have extended producer responsibility for plastic, e-waste, hazard battery waste, and now maybe we will have a EPR policy for textile waste also. But the policies has not made their intention clearly. I thought these EPR policies are basically made to strengthen the collection and segregation of different categories of waste. But now what we are feeling, these policies are basically meant for collecting data from different stakeholders. So we are losing our focus on the collection part, which is the basic need of the EPR policy, and now we are focusing on collecting data by promoting them to get registered with the CPCB online portals, and CPCB is asking all their informations, what they're consuming, what they're producing, what they're selling, and collecting data means, I don't know, I cannot relate myself by collecting data. How can we build the sustainable environment? So those are my views. I will take your question in this segment. Thank you.
Thank you, Jain sir. Sachin is there. So, ma'am, how much time do we have now? Hey, we've just first round here. You said 1 hour, we're not even 40 minutes. Okay, so let's have a quick Q&A round for maybe 10 minutes. And instead of asking questions, I mean, I ask the participants, the audience here, I mean, you can raise your hand, the mic would move around and then introduce yourself. But please just short in asking the questions. And also to address. थोड़ा mic घुमा सकते हैं please? यहीं से ले जाइए. Yeah. एक तो लाइट बड़ी खतरनाक है, आँखों में पड़ती है.
Hello, can you hear me? So I work with the Chennai Metropolitan Development Authority, and we faced flooding over the last decade multiple times. My question is to you is that I feel that a lot of the concerns that our cities face are converging. We don't have pollution right now, but Delhi's faced pollution over the past 15 years. How do we create some kind of framework for cities to discuss and collaborate on solutions to common problems, where I feel like we're not exchanging institutional knowledge, where different cities are facing different problems, we need to share the solutions with each other so that we can kind of collaborate on creating solutions that work for the entire country rather than for individual cities. Do you think this is something that's possible? Perhaps either to Ashish sir or Rumi sir.
So just remember the question. We'll take 3-4 questions and then just wind up. Okay,
so
fine. Wait. Let's take another question also. Yeah, please. थोड़ा mic घुमा दीजिए, please.
Hello. Thanks for the wonderful presentation. So my name is Shonit. I work as a program fellow at Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs. So I just have a question that should we focus on this term called urban carrying capacity? Like in India, you are seeing that many cities are building metro. In spite of the fact whether that cities need that metro, so is it that time that like enough is enough? You have infrastructure kind of into a limited zone. So like I want to hear all of your views on this. Like, thank you.
Okay, 2 more. Yeah, please. Take this one.
Hi, I am Ajay Agrawal. I am working in solid waste management systems. So my simple question is like if we see about Delhi, the solid waste management system could be enhanced, but the transportation system of solid waste management system is the way worse. That's why we are not able to see the progress which should happen in Delhi.
So yeah, I think that will be the last one. I'm quite amazed. It's all gender by. I mean, all men are asking questions. Anyway.
Hello, I am Surya Kumar Shinde. Just you mentioned about the roti kapda makan when comes, then absolutely environment goes second. Can you explain such kind of thing, how you say prepare a demand in a metro city so that can be implemented to the next level of cities? Just explain an example of that.
Okay, one last if there's a woman. Yeah, please.
Hello sir, Kunjit this side. I am reading about value chain, sustainable value chain, and my question is how we are working towards to managing the waste towards it.
Okay, so great. So that shows our smartness, resilience, because most of the questions are directed to you, Jain sir. Waste is the quintessential smartness that we require in the cities. But before you answer, I would request right from Rumi, just the last minute that you, maybe 30 seconds. How do you want to wrap up then ma'am, and then you take it, please. And I think there's a question addressed to you also, ma'am. Please go ahead. Rumi, you start.
I would like to partly address the point that one of the participants raised about exchanging knowledge, since you are from this discipline, you may be aware of some effort has certainly been made by the Urban Ministry and the various other departments of the government insofar as bringing together stakeholders and organizing events and sessions from time to time to share knowledge. But I would just mention that there is a very interesting activity, I think insofar as I remember correctly, if it's going now, is about the training programs that are organized for municipal functionaries. It is organized in different states of the country by the state level training institutions, in which experts go and deliver talks for the benefit of elected functionaries and appointed officials, wherein the things that you mentioned about expertise that is available or a certain specialized knowledge that's available within a certain institution in the country should get greater exposure. I think such platforms are excellent because the people who work in local governments are the number one players in urban governance, and therefore if they are exposed to those technologies, techniques in planning or in technology, then they would be able to impart it in the most effective manner. I would conclude by saying this.
Yeah, I think carrying capacity calculation is absolutely necessary. And long time back, I had kind of steered one research where we had identified two very important elements of urban carrying capacity, which one is the availability of water, and the other is the green spaces, per capita, which you can provide. These should be. I mean, there was a lot of background research that went into deriving this, but then we found that these two were two most critical elements to determine the urban carrying capacity.
Sir, just 30 seconds.
Yeah, I would like to tell you now, we spoil the environment and we are finding the solutions. So we are talking about smart solutions and smart cities, we are talking about so many things. Now if I think about my father's and my mother's house in my country, those are total sustainable properties. So all the solid waste has been managed. We had like pits, we manage solid waste and we make fertilizer and we use for a small vegetation over side of it. So those have been, that is why still Sri Lanka is like that. 90% of the people are very concerned about not to spoil the environment. Only 10% of the people are spoiling the country, but that also growing very fast now. So we have to I think we have to educate people, even from the schools itself, how to protect our environment and how to protect our natural resources. Thank you.
Jain sir, 1 minute please.
Yeah, thank you. I think there were three questions that was on solid waste management. Someone asked the road infrastructure is not good and that leads to poor waste management. And someone asked that roti kapda makan ka koi example ho to bataएं. So I recently visited Indore and you all are aware about Indore model, and there I found that 100% segregations, and I truly believe that source segregation is the key component for the successful solid waste management in any city. If citizens start segregation their waste at least into three categories: wet waste, dry waste and hazardous waste, and they stop littering of waste on the roadside. If they start disposing their waste only to the dustbin, then we could have different picture. Because it's very easy for any agency to collect waste from the dustbin, and it is not possible to collect waste from the roadside, from the railway track, from the rivers or water bodies. So first, and this very simple, we do segregations in our daily lives. We do segregations of spices in kitchens. We do segregation of clothes in our wardrobes. And why can't we do segregation of waste? So it's a human tendency. We do segregation of those things which are valuable for us, and we do not consider waste as a value. It's a value for the recycling industry only. It's a value for the waste pickers only. And so a common man start considering the environmental cost in his thinking process. Then we can have very good smart cities in India also, and Indore is an example. And why Indore model is not replicable to other cities, that's also another story, because Indore has invested I think 6,000 per capita per ton. So Indore is investing 5,000 rupees per ton for the collection and treatment of waste, and no other cities can't afford to spend so much money. And that's why we won't be able to replicate it though. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and with this we come to the end of this session. Just, as a wrap up, because there's no time as Sachin has asked. So Samuel Stein has written a book called The Real Estate State, The Capital City. And the silver lining is you can't do anything alienating the people. You have to go back to the basics and plan with the people. People should be at the core. And I did a review of a very interesting work recently called Migrants and Machine Politics. Probably that review will be published soon. You cannot just expect 40% of the people living in slums in India, bypassing them and then designing. So the design has to be quite inherently linked to the people below, so that there is complete ownership of the city. Unfortunately, that ownership you don't find in top-bottom solutions. The solutions have to come from below so that people own these solutions. Thank you so much. It's been a lovely panel. Thank you all. And I'm not happy because we had 1 hour, but we just had to finish off maybe in 40-45 minutes. Thank you so much, and thank you all for being here, and of course for asking the questions.